Let's f***ing go!
Hello, Rivals fans, and welcome back to the Rivals Report, the show that gets you up to speed on Rivals esports news in a nice, bite-sized package. My name is Diatonic, and this is the Rivals Report number 32 for the week of January 19th, 2026. On this week's report, the Rivals community is celebrating the release of Season 6 and the game's newest hero, Deadpool. Several big tournaments were held to commemorate the release, featuring mega prize pools, NetEase backing, and some of your favorite Rivals content creators. We've got highlights from both the Super Deadpool Invitational and the Deadpool Creator Cup. And the Scouting Spotlight is back, featuring 3 more big names you should know before Ignite gets started. Well, Season 6 has arrived in Marvel Rivals, and with it comes the game's newest hero, Deadpool. This is one of the biggest new hero releases in Rivals history, with the game peaking at 200,000 players on Steam, the most we've seen since Season 2. And with that release hype comes several events to commemorate the release, with 2 major Deadpool tournaments taking place over the weekend. The first of which was the $200,000 Deadpool Invitational, held by former Overwatch League player Super. This tournament consisted of 6 teams of content creators specifically invited to the event, featuring names like Necros, Flats, XQC, and even Tyler1 as captains. And it was all hosted by broadcast talent such as Uber, Mr. X, and of course Super himself. The celebrity captains all took turns drafting their teams in a Discord call, pulling from a pool of creators like Aramori, Moxie, Dokibird, FanFan, Boger, Amelie, and so many more. Once the draft was settled, the tournament was to take place over 2 stages. A round-robin stage to determine seeding, followed by a single elimination stage. The first and second seeds out of the round-robin stage both received buys, making the top spots coming out of round-robin that much more valuable. But of course, of the 6 teams that entered, only 2 would be in contention for the top prize, with the champions taking home the lion's share at 100 grand. Team XQC were one of the top seeds coming out of the round-robin stage and earned themselves a bye straight into semifinals. They'd tangle with Team Tyler1 there and would pick up a contested win on Midtown to lock in their final spot. XQC drafted the likes of Calvin, Warren, Amelie, Aspen, and Sweet Anita into the ranks. They'd end up squaring off against Team E-Rob in those finals, who'd battle their way through every round of the bracket without a bye. They clocked wins against both Team Flats and Team Necros along the way, knocking out a couple of big Rivals content creators. E-Rob chose players like Dean So Cool, Metaphor, Lulu Lovely, Ico Bliss, and even Space, who had a stint with Envy's Rivals roster in the early days of that team. And the stage was set for the final clash of the tournament, with thousands of dollars on the line as Team XQC and Team E-Rob entered the arena one last time. The battle began on Burning T'Challa for some domination action, with Team XQC jumping out ahead early. But E-Rob and company would claw their way back to a 99-99 overtime on the very first point. But Team XQC would pull it together on the back half of the map, taking control on point 2, but they'd struggle yet again on point 3. Just when it seemed like Team E-Rob were walking away with map 1, XQC and crew locked in and stole it away in the end. It was off to Yggdrasil Path for map 2, with E-Rob painfully close to a map 1 win and looking to get back in the fight. XQC's team would lock in some serious defense ahead of checkpoint 1, shaving off just enough time to stop E-Rob about halfway down the track. Following halftime, Team XQC would speedrun the cart down the path and would finish off their opponents with over 4 minutes still on the clock. And with that decisive finish on Yggdrasil Path, Team XQC closed out the Invitational as champions and 100k richer to show for it. Between the star-studded rosters, the massive prize pool, and the general hype surrounding Deadpool's release, it's no surprise viewership surged for this event. And thanks to the content creators bringing their own audiences to the event, even more eyes are being placed on Rivals than ever before. And Super's tournament wasn't the only one held over the weekend to celebrate the release of Deadpool. Rival streamer BasimZB also held the Deadpool Creator Cup, teaming up with Hammer and Shield Productions to deliver the broadcast. 8 teams filled to the brim with Rivals content creators took to the battlefield to duke it out for a piece of the $40,000 prize pool. And this one featured a star-studded lineup as well, including names like Necros, Boger, J3, Aramori, FanFan, and more. And with names like Liger, Shib, Matsy, Vaudable, Shibby, and 2-Tap Tony behind the desk, we were in for an insanely high-quality broadcast. This event began with a draft that took place separate of the tournament broadcast itself. The draft order was selected at random, then the captains took turns selecting who they'd be playing with. This draft featured camera feeds from every single captain as the draft was taking place, helping connect names and faces for the fans watching. This made the Creator Cup draft one of the best produced we've seen thus far. The draft even featured graphics showing each player's hero pool, helping hint at what kind of team comps we were expecting to see. From there, teams would plan scrims leading up to the event itself, trying to give themselves opportunities to learn how to communicate and play together. The event also featured a round-robin stage before moving to a 4-team bracket cutoff. The teams were split into groups, and only 2 teams from each group would advance, so the competition was fierce. The round-robin stage took place across 3 different broadcasts, giving a wider field of vision for the fans. I was invited behind the scenes of the broadcast to gather a first-hand account and some media as well, and I got to witness the orchestration of an HSP event in person. It's busy, but the hard work of the production team helps to create moments like the numerous ones we saw over the course of this event. But of course, with 40K on the line, we had to decide a winner. And that deciding match would come down to the Avengers, led by streamer Benser, and Team Captain, led by, well, Team Captain. Benser would bring together some creators that have prior experience in tournaments like this, and some familiar names too. Ashago, Pick and Roll, Jelly Peanut, No Damage Rocket, and Peach. They'd assemble against Team Aramori in the semifinal round, one that was an uphill battle for them, but they'd eventually walk away the winners 2-1. Team Captain did his research on the players and decided to call upon Zotaic, Day, Mad Lil G, Aline, and Kikyu to do battle. They dominate in their semifinal match against Team Greg Albert, taking it 2-0 and building a wave of momentum for themselves heading into the finals. And we reached those finals, with the Avengers assembling once more to face off against Team Captain. But this was actually a rematch of their round-robin meeting, which just so happened to be the first broadcast match on the main channel. The Avengers walked away from that meeting unscathed, taking all 3 maps off Team Captain's team, so this was bound to be an uphill battle. Then that battle would kick off on Hell's Heaven, and right out of the gate, it was clear that this was a very different Team Captain and crew. Point 1 was all Team Captain, going from 0 to 100 in confident fashion. The Avengers would clap back on the second point, taking and holding it almost right away. But Team Captain and company would claw their way back into the fight, and after an intense 99-99 overtime war, Team Captain would take map 1. They were off to Spider Islands for map 2, and it was a tough offensive run for Team Captain and his teammates, but they managed to push it all the way to the end under overtime. Things were looking rough for Team Captain after halftime, with the Avengers able to push the card almost uncontested for about half the map. But they suddenly ran out of steam, with Team Captain finding advantages in fight after fight, and they'd win their second map of the series. One last chance for the Avengers here as we moved on to Central Park, but Team Captain would clear the map to kick things off. The Avengers would unlock the cart and make it by the skin of their teeth to the final checkpoint, but on that last staircase towards Dracula's throne, they'd meet their match. So Team Captain closed out this tournament with a 3-0 performance in Grand Finals, a complete comeback for their first encounter in the tournament. They won when it counted most, and they'd walk away with the largest share of the prize pool. The scope of this event was larger than many of the draft tournaments that came before it, but the players and staff rose to the occasion here. The Deadpool Creator Cup is yet another example of passionate Rivals fans putting on another professional production with some must-see matches across the board. Be sure to check out BasimZB's socials for future creator events, and follow Hammer and Shield Productions for more Rivals events like this one. Links are in the description. And finally this week, the Scouting Spotlight returns. We're taking some of the biggest names in Rivals Esports from 2025 and introducing them through this player profile series. From the hottest free agents to the most dramatic storylines from 2025, we're telling the stories of players you need to know about as competitive Rivals enters its second year. Whether you're a new fan wanting to get caught up on the last year of Rivals, or a veteran viewer in search of a new favorite, we're getting you prepped for an action-packed year. The second installment of our Scouting Spotlight begins with one of the Americas region's stars from the earliest days of Rivals. They've been in the competitive scene since the very beginning as one of the marquee members of an iconic team. They've overcome trials and tribulations and have faced more adversity than most in the scene. But in spite of all that, they've become a trailblazer, especially for female esports fans and aspiring players. That's right, our Spotlight this week kicks off with none other than Sentinel's strategist player Aramori. Aramori's earliest days as a competitive hero shooter player were, like many others, rooted in Overwatch. She'd make her mark in that scene, playing in a number of tournaments and making numerous appearances in Calling All Heroes events. She'd compete with the New York Excelsior's Academy squad as well, but she'd truly start to hit the big time after the jump to Rivals. She'd be among the first roster that Nightmare signed all the way back during the War of the Realms tournament. They'd come out on top there, and at the 2024 Marvel Rivals Invitational as well. The Nightmare crew would compete in the first season of the Vanguardian League as LFO before joining forces with powerhouse NA esports org Sentinels. Sentinels Rivals would come out the gate swinging, winning the first ever Rivals Fight Night event, taking home the crown in the Season 1 MRC, and defeating 100 Thieves in the Grand Finals of Ignite Stage 1. Expectations were high heading into the mid-season finals for Sentinels, but after a 3-0 loss to Rad Esports and a 3-2 coup de grace from Citadel, they'd clock only a top 8 finish in Guangzhou. They brushed themselves off and set their sights on the back half of the season, but they'd again be defeated in surprising fashion during Stage 2, and they'd ultimately miss the Grand Finals LAN at DreamHack Atlanta. Eliminated in the end by Dark Zero, Stage 2 would be the final appearance for the Sentinels Rivals roster, as they'd announced shortly after Grand Finals that they'd be pausing operations. But Aramori is still active and competing to this very day, most recently taking part in the Season 5 MRC as part of the faction Flark. Aramori is a strategist with an incredibly keen eye. She's sharp and often prioritizes survival in order to maintain her team's stability. She's big on avoiding unnecessary deaths, maximizing control over capture points and objectives through her own longevity. She's got a well-rounded hero pool, able to rock heroes like Luna, Loki, Cloak and Dagger, and Mantis. She's also got one of the coolest heads in the region, hardly ever appearing the slightest bit shaken even in the face of adversity. And of course, that adversity comes both on and off the battlefield, as she's been a strong advocate and role model for women in the esports space. Tactical, disciplined, and team-oriented, Aramori is the type of strategist anyone would want at their back. Shifting gears to the EMEA region once again for our next profile, we're covering a player with prior esports experience outside the hero shooter genre. He played as part of an iconic unsigned team in the early days of Ignite, one that would topple some powerhouse orgs to win Stage 1. His Captain America was scary enough to be a top target man against him throughout the entirety of the mid-season finals, and he's always been on the front lines of every fight defending his team. We're of course talking about Polly of Citadel Gaming. Polly's road to Rivals began a bit differently than many other pros, throwing his hat in the competitive Fortnite ring in his earliest days. He competed in numerous high-profile Fortnite events, including the Europe Fortnite Champions Series Grand Finals in 2021. His recorded competitions in Fortnite end in mid-2023, but he'd resurface in Marvel Rivals as a competitor in the Season 1 MRC. He'd clock a top 6 finish in that tournament as part of a faction called Royal Beamers. From there, he'd start making regular Fight Night appearances as part of a team called Berber Patapim. Not only would Berber Patapim go on to pick up numerous RFN wins, but they'd qualify into Ignite through the open qualifiers. They'd go on a tear during Ignite Stage 1, defeating the would-be world champions Virtus Pro in the upper bracket, and eventually winning the entire thing in a 4-2 barn burner against Rad Esports. That landed them a spot in the mid-season finals in Guangzhou, where they'd end up 4th, knocked out of the tournament by the team that would go on to win it, Rad. Polly pulled out the Captain America early on in that tournament, and it was so terrifying that nearly every team would ban Cap against Citadel. CTG would end up as the runners-up in Stage 2, making land once again at DreamHack Atlanta. There, they'd ultimately end up in the top 6 after an incredibly close match against 100 Thieves. Afterwards, Citadel would confirm that they're planning to stay in Rivals, but would be refreshing their roster. And their first newly signed player? None other than Polly himself. Polly is an incredibly reliable player, seen on the front lines of nearly every team fight his squad is drawn into. He's always in the mix, shields raised and absorbing damage to create enough space for his team to operate. He's a master of controlling the space, serving as the gatekeeper to decide who's able to break through that front line, and he's rarely willing to lift the gates. He's established himself in the rival space enough to become a stable part of the roster, having already been signed back to Citadel after they hit the reset button. And he's an incredibly young player, especially to have risen so quickly through the ranks as he has, making him a long-term investable talent that has plenty to offer the scene for years to come. We've got one more profile for you this week, and for this one, we have to go to the lesser-known region of China. This player initially made a name for himself in Overwatch as well, and has quite the fan base in his home region. Some say that the skies belong to him, showing prowess on some of the flying duelists in Rivals, but also packing a punch on others like Wolverine and Psylocke. For the final profile, we're breaking down the anchor of Chinese squad OUG, Molan Rod. Before Rivals, Molan had a career in competitive Overwatch that spanned nearly a decade. His first appearance in the Overwatch space was all the way back in some of the earliest Chinese tournaments in 2016. Ironically enough, he even competed in some of the NetEase run Overwatch tournaments before spending a few years playing as part of the Contenders series as well. His final entry into competitive Overwatch was as late as 2024, before popping back up in Rivals in 2025. He first played as a member of OUG in the Marvel Rivals Invitational, where they'd win in dominant 4-0 fashion. From there, OUG's focus was on total domination over the entirety of the China region, starting by taking home the Season 1 MRC. They'd win every regional tournament they entered, taking first place in both China Stage 1 and Stage 2, and most recently blazed a trail of destruction through the Season 5 MRC as well. But Molan has yet to bring home hardware from a LAN tournament, though he'd be present at both the mid-season and grand finals. OUG would manage to eliminate Japanese Team Reject at the MSF, but would end up in the top 6 in the end. They'd struggle at DreamHack Atlanta as well, being sent home out of the group stage alongside fellow Chinese team Iconics. So maybe not quite ready for the global stage, but certainly a force to be reckoned with in China. Molan tends to keep applying the pressure, characteristic of the team's aggressive tempo and rapid rotations they've adopted. They can get the better of slow comps and strategies with their fast engagement style, with Molan leading the charge by land and by air. But his team generally looks to him as the conductor of this somewhat frantic tempo, and if he's able to latch onto a foe, it's difficult to shake him off. He identifies strongly with big playmaker duelist heroes, taking advantage of Human Torch when he was a popular meta pick, but his hero pool runs from Psylocke to Wolf and even Iron Fist. He's gained quite the fan base for himself in his home region, being one of the early breakout stars in China, but time will tell if he's able to help elevate his region, as the skies do indeed belong to Molan. And that covers our 3 profiles for this week's Scouting Spotlight. We'll continue building on these profiles week after week, leading all the way up to the start of this year's Ignite season. There are so many players poised to do great things this year, and we can't wait to introduce them all to you. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. Well, that's all for this week's Rivals Report. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest in Marvel Rivals Esports. And be sure to follow me on other platforms including Twitch, X, and TikTok. I've been Diatonic, you've been amazing, and I'll see you in-game.